First things that I wanted to do with Scott is I wanted to get him on a polygraph. And
just to eliminate you as a suspect, you'd be willing to take that?
Turn it off.
Would you be willing to take a polygraph?
They're accurate, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I believe they're accurate.
No, I certainly will.
Just to eliminate you as a suspect. Just to eliminate you as a suspect. Just to eliminate you as a suspect, you'd be willing to take
Turn it off.
Would you be willing to take a polygraph?
They're accurate, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not nothing that can be used against you, but yeah, I believe they're accurate.
No, I certainly will.
Wouldn't be now, it'd be, in a day or two or a week, you can think about it, but.
No.
Just to eliminate you as a suspect, you'd be willing to take.
Turn it off.
Would you be willing to take a polygraph?
They're accurate, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not nothing that can be used against you, but yeah, I believe they're accurate.
No, I certainly will.
Wouldn't be now, it'd be, in a day or two or a week, you can think about it, but.
No,
It's just like the next step in this thing.
Sure.
Really, what's left is the flyers, is the fact that your dog came home with a leash on. That bothers me,
no question.
yeah.
What concerns me most is doing anything I can to further progress.
I appreciate that. And I don't want you to hold it against me. I mean, sometimes I hate asking you.
You gotta do it.
But I really do have to do it, and, I mean, I understand, I'm glad you have a strong support system.
Yeah. Well, we can do a lot.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
No, I mean, I've asked you a couple times what to do, so I have the answers to that, so we're gonna go do it.
That's what, yeah.
No, I mean, I've asked you a couple times what to do, so I have the answers to that, so we're gonna go do it.
That's what, yeah. There's, all we can do now is make people aware of the problem, the situation, and hope that somebody saw something or knows something.
No, I mean, I've asked you a couple times what to do, so I have the answers to that, so we're gonna go do it.
That's what, yeah. There's, and hope that somebody saw something or knows something. And hope that somebody saw something or knows something.
I was coming down Covina towards the park, going past Lacey on one side and Medina's on the other, and I just looked over and there were 3 guys on Medina's property and a van out front, and the only reason it caught my eye is that they turned around and looked at me, sort of made me feel a little bit uncomfortable.
The only thing we couldn't eliminate was Scott.
Just to eliminate you as a suspect, you'd be willing to take that? Would you be willing to take a polygraph?
it's a really useful tool for detectives because it gauges cooperation level when you ask somebody if they're willing to take the poly. But in addition,
things you ask Scott Peterson is, would you take a polygraph for us?
Right.
Would you take a polygraph for us?
right.
Is
Right.
that standard procedure?
Well, yeah, the polygraph. I love the polygraph because it does a variety of different things. Okay, now, of course, it's not admissible in court. Well, I don't care about that because I'm not using it to go into court with it. But the first thing you do is, what's the person's cooperation level when you say the word polygraph? But the first thing you do is, what's the person's cooperation level when you say the word polygraph?
Just to eliminate you as a suspect, you'd be willing to take that? Would you be willing to take a polygraph?
Would you take a polygraph for us?
Right.
Is
Right.
that standard?
Do is, what's the person's cooperation level when you say the word polygraph? You know, do they run like a scalded cat away
No.
from you, or do they say, "Oh, absolutely, I'll take it"? You know, and somebody who wants the focus to be on Lacey and wants us to be trying to turn over every rock and log and look under every car and blanket that might be in a park or something like that to try and find her. Take the poly, take the focus off of you, and let us move on so we're not spending time trying to clear you. But when
the poly. But in addition to that, the polygraph, if it's run by somebody who knows what they're doing, will give you some clues as to whether or not there's some anxiety present with this person and whether it looks like they might have had something to do with it. Do they tell truthful answers? Do they show deception in the questions? And in Scott's case, Al had asked him the night before if he'd be willing to take a poly. He said he was. And so one of the first things I did is I called and he had no hesitation whatsoever. He said, "Yeah, I'll come right down." And he did. And we'd worked with Doug on many, many other murder cases. Came down and we started getting information together as far as what kind of questions he was going to ask. By that time, Scott decided, apparently through input from his father, that he wasn't going to take the polygraph. At-risk lifestyle, and that's what made me believe pretty much from the start that she wasn't coming home. Of course, because of these things, comparing her with other victims that I'd seen in the past, she didn't lead an at-risk lifestyle, and that's what made me believe pretty much from the start that she wasn't coming home. Of course, you can't tell that to the family. You don't really know it for sure, but we'd also backed in the driveway, and a couple of the neighbors had mentioned they had never, ever seen him back the truck in the driveway. So in a period of time, his explanation while he was there is he checked his email. He had a mortising tool that he had been delivered for woodworking and that he partially assembled while he was there. Specific details about the sign that was on Brooks Island as far as you can't land here, you can't get on the island, there's no trespassing there. Saw him either launching his boat or recovering his boat with the trailer, trying to load it, and I guess he backed a trailer about the way I would. Not day before, when he had gotten his hair cut by Lacey's sister, Amy, he had mentioned to her that on Christmas Eve, he was going to go golfing at Del Rio Country Club. He'd also told this to Ron Gransky, who was Lacey's stepdad. Maybe she could have been if she was. So this is on Christmas Eve, and there wasn't a lot of activity at this warehouse. It was kind of like a strip mall warehouse.
Did you go very far? Or?
Well, I mean, right a couple miles, went north, found like a little island kind of deal there. Island had a bunch of trash on it. I remember a big sign that said "No landing." It looked like some broken piers around it. I just assumed it'd be a decent, shallow area.
Did you troll?
A little bit. I mean, a lot of the reason I went was just to get that boat in the water to see,
Yeah.
Specific with any of the officers or even with Brocchini as far as what he was fishing for. The boat did test positive for having salt water in the motor and in the bottom of the boat, but there was no evidence that he was doing any fishing, and he couldn't speak specifically about fishing. Whereas if you go across the street here to my neighbor's house and you mention fishing for him to him, he'll talk to you for 3 hours about it, and he knows it don't really make sense. Make detectives suspicious. The warehouse and the boat specifically, one of the things that they discovered besides salt water in the boat and salt water in the motor is they discovered that there was a hair that was wrapped up in a pair of needle nose pliers that were in the bottom of the boat, partially underneath one of the seats that goes across the boat. A hair that was wrapped up in a pair of needle nose pliers that were in the bottom of the boat, partially underneath one of the seats that goes across the boat. And when the pliers was opened, it separated this hair. So it took one hair and it turned it into 2 hairs. They did analysis on this hair, and it wasn't absolutely conclusive because they didn't have the root, and the only way that you can match DNA on the same kind of hair that was on Lacey's head. To me, it kind of cuts both ways. I mean, it doesn't necessarily. Sharon Rocha in particular knew nothing about this boat. And when she first heard about it, she was astounded by it. Lacey's friends, Stacy, Renee, Kim, Lori, they all said that Lacey knew nothing about the boat. Because if she guys with boats down here where I live, and whenever they're getting a boat, that's pretty much the excitement of the neighborhood. Everybody knows so-and-so is getting a boat because you can't not talk about it to your buddies. And so for boats down here where I live, and whenever they're getting a boat, that's pretty much the excitement of the neighborhood. Everybody knows so-and-so is getting a boat because you can't not talk about it to your buddies. And so for Scott to keep the boat quiet, for Scott to have the boat from December 9th all the way up to the 24th when he first put it in the water and not trying it before that, suggests to me that he was keeping that secret, not letting people know about it because he had premeditated plans to kill his wife. And there was one anchor that was found in the boat, found in the front of the boat. Bucket wasn't on it. We never did recover the bucket. Don't know where that is. Suspect it's probably on the bottom of San Francisco Bay. But this make detectives suspicious, and it don't know where that is. Suspect it's probably on the bottom of San Francisco Bay. But just little things like this make detectives
Suspicious.
And crimes against women, rapists, people like that, sexual assault criminals, anybody like that that was in our database that we could check on that was in the area, they were all contacted. Their alibis were written down. Their alibis were confirmed. And their alibis were written down. Their alibis were confirmed. And there was concrete residue that was on the inside of the boat where it would have been left if somebody was rolling a weighted body out of the boat. But there was concrete residue that was on the inside of the boat where it would have been left if somebody was rolling a weighted body out of the boat. Likely that she was weighted, she was put in the bottom of San Francisco Bay, and as time went by, it separated her limbs from her body. And heard in the past that there were family members that had notified the major network, at least one of the major networks, and mentioned this case because they had a contact there in New York or something. One's left out of a big story, so they all pile on top of it and grab for every bite they can get. Of course, the way the media works is they don't want to be the ones left out of a big story, so they all pile on top of it and grab for every bite they can get.
When you ask a reporter, what do you think of leaks? I mean, they're great. I mean, obviously, I love people giving me information because then I can break the news. Gloria for CBS News, Modesto, California. I go on the air and I break the news to the country. Breaking news. Scott Peterson's been arrested. We flashed his picture with the big arrested. $15,000 cash. Country. Breaking news. Scott Peterson's been arrested. We flashed his picture with the big arrested. And I give the public the information. Arrested in San Diego, has a new look, has a beach blonde goatee, blonde hair, arrested with camping gear, $15,000 cash, $15,000 cash. I just reported that all day long. I mean, I was doing hit after hit after hit after hit about Scott being arrested. And I was the only one that had it. So all the other stations were just trying to play catch up. What? Oh, how do we confirm that? So they were flooding. I mean, there were already, I did it right in front of the I did it right in front of the Modesto Police Headquarters. So they were already, all the media was already there. So it was just a matter of confirming it. Because everybody else wanted to report it. They didn't want to say, well, Gloria Gomez just reported this. They wanted, you don't burn that.
Yeah, she was pretty sharp. She needled me pretty good, too. She would try to, come on, Ed, you know more than that. Come on, you can tell me. I mean, I'm a sucker. Look, oh my God, she's gorgeous.
They do share a lot with me as far as what's going on behind the scenes.
She needled me pretty good, too.
Of course.
And obviously, the more you work with law enforcement, the more they trust you if you don't burn them.
Oh my God, she's gorgeous.
They do share a lot with me as well. And obviously, the more you work with law enforcement, the more they trust you if you don't burn them.
Yeah, she was She was pretty sharp. She needled me pretty good too. She would try to, come on, Ed, you know more than that. Come on, you can tell me.
That behind the scenes, their eye was strictly on Scott. I would have reported that they were looking for someone else, and they were looking into someone else, if they were. But they weren't. Because they were so focused on Amber and a phone call. Knew that behind the scenes, their eye was strictly on Scott.
That we knew were probably ridiculous from the start. We had a lot of people that wanted to get involved in this case that had nothing to do with it. This case, it created a lot of wild goose chases that we had to go down that we knew were probably ridiculous from the start. We had a lot of people that wanted to get involved in this case that had nothing to do with it. I remember there was one person that claimed they'd seen Lacey in a grocery store up in Washington, and gosh, I remember all the psychics that would call, and it would be interesting. They'd call and they'd want to, who am I talking to? And I'm thinking to myself, well, you're the psychic, you ought to know who you're talking to. And they'd always say things like, well, we believe her remains are in salt water or something like that. And well, that's helpful, community service officers. And so it was a lot of people in that office. And Al is walking by Beverly's desk, and Beverly's desk was headphones on the phone, and she was typing into her computer, so what she was typing was showing up on our monitor. And Al walks by and he's watching these words come up, and he asked Beverly, are you talking to this person? And she said, well, yeah. And so Al grabs the phone and he gets on the phone with Amber and monitor, and Al walks by and he's watching these words come up, and he asked Beverly, are you talking to this? And so she had wine corks they'd had bottles of wine at dinner, and she had programs from events they had gone to and things like this. And so she started talking to him. Well, she didn't know it at that time, but we already had a court-ordered wire intercept going on Scott's phone, so that call was going to be picked up anyway. Because she was very fragile, and I was the only single guy in the unit. All the other guys I worked with were married, and so Al Carter assigned her to me to kind of be her handler, because we knew that she was going to be calling at all hours, because every time she got off the phone from a call with Scott, she was kind of a wreck for a while. So she'd call me, and then I'd kind of have to talk to her about what's going on and everything and calm her down that this was going on. Well, we also had Amber's call on a wire intercept to make sure that we could monitor her calls if she wasn't recording them, so that we would know that she wasn't filling Scott with information of what was going on. She had over 29 hours of recorded phone conversation during the time that we had her up on the wire. And
claiming that there were all these Lacey sightings. Nobody came forward like the day of that I'm aware of, or let's say Christmas Day, to say, yeah, I saw her. They were coming forward once the flyers were out on December, late on the 25th into the 26th, and thereafter, saying, oh, I saw her. Now, the prosecution made a big map of sightings, like not just of the Modesto area, but the world, and pregnant women, people who were walking dogs, people who sort of fit Lacey's description, and they called as many as they could who fit that description. Not the people who made the sightings. They called the people who were walking in the park. There was a pregnant woman who fit Lacey's description, but she had a chocolate lab. She didn't have a golden retriever. She was a woman who fit Lacey's description, but she had a chocolate lab. She didn't have a golden retriever. She was
that walked the neighborhood, two of which were pregnant. One had a chocolate lab, one had a golden retriever. Easily could have been mistaken as Lacey by somebody who's not specifically familiar with any of those gals. Three other gals attractive that walked the neighborhood, two of which were pregnant. One had a chocolate lab, one had a golden retriever. Easily could have been mistaken as Lacey by somebody who's not specifically familiar with any of those gals.
Found the pregnant lady with a golden retriever that walked her dog on that day, and the conclusion was that was not Lacey. We actually found the pregnant lady with a golden retriever that walked her dog on that day, and the conclusion was that was not Lacey and Mackenzie.
The description was somewhat different, and we're not sure it was her.
And yet,
there were three other gals attractive that walked the neighborhood, two of which were pregnant. One had a chocolate lab, one had a golden retriever. easily could have been mistaken as Lacey by somebody who's not specifically familiar with any of those gals. And so when it comes to that, intentions oftentimes are good, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes people just want to get involved in the big thing that's going on. And there might be some of that going on here. But abducted Lacey. First off, if they're going to try and frame Scott, they're not going to hide the body on the bottom of San Francisco Bay. First off, if they're going to try and frame Scott, they're not going to hide the body on the bottom of San Francisco Bay. Are they going to take the risk to transport the body when everybody's looking for Lacey from Modesto to San Francisco Bay? Much different than when Scott was going up there when nobody was looking for Lacey. In addition to that, I see a lot of boaters down here, and most of them are not burglars. So to think that there's burglars that are out boating and things like that seems kind of suspicious. And most of them are not burglars. So to think that there's burglars that are out boating and things like that seems kind of suspicious. Burglary was thoroughly investigated. The two guys that were involved in it over a period of 2 days immediately copped out to it. They immediately admitted their involvement in it for the specific reason that they didn't want to be linked to Lacey's disappearance because of that unwritten code in a custodial facility, whether it's a local jail or state prison. There's certain crimes that people that get incarcerated don't care about, but there is a classification of crimes where if you abduct and kill a mother, a pregnant mother, you're not going to be looked upon too favorably by the other people that are locked up with you. Around mid-January or so, we got information that the National Enquirer was going to run a story with a picture of Scott and Amber together. And how those photos either got out or they were photos taken by somebody who was there and they got released. And the next thing you know, the National Enquirer's got one of the photos with Amber in the red dress and Scott in the tux, and they're going to run it in that week's edition of the National Enquirer. Sharon was sitting across from me, and I said, well, there's some things that have developed on this case, and we want to make you aware of them before you get surprised and ambushed by them. And so I opened up the folder and I slid it across the table, and Sharon Rocha looked at it, and I just, what took place on this? So we said, don't draw any necessarily conclusions for this, keep an open mind. On what took place on this. So we said, don't draw any necessarily conclusions for this, keep an open mind. And I'm always suspicious of the person closest to the victim, and that's how you start a murder investigation, is you always look at the person closest.
Yes. We were all putting our hand on the baby's stomach. Scott was trying to find it for us so we could feel it kick. And yes. We were all putting our hand on the baby's stomach. Scott was trying to find it for us so we could feel it kick. And they were just ecstatic. When you first
Cube, the summer before Lacey became pregnant, and there was a new baby there, and everybody was holding the baby. And when they were trying to get Scott to hold the baby, he recoiled from it like it was a rattlesnake. He didn't want to be involved in that. To me, was scripted, phrased in a way to show that he was devoted to this girl, and I don't want to have the suspicion on me, so I'm leaving this recording to get you guys on a different track. So we're suspicious of a lot of things because people that talk to detectives oftentimes have a reason to lie, and so you have to verify these through. We're suspicious of a lot of things because people that talk to detectives oftentimes have a reason to lie, and so you have to verify these through a variety of different ways. We're suspicious of a lot of things because people that talk to detectives oftentimes have a reason to lie, and so you have to verify these through a variety of different ways. O'Keefe called me in on Christmas Day, and he told me what had happened to Lacey and that she was missing, and then he did the bio on her and told me about her. My belief was this was a murder case, and at the time it was a no-body case. I was able to avoid and evade our tail on him. Even the air unit lost him at one time. The air unit missed out on him. But one of the agents saw him crossing an intersection right in front of him, and so the chase was back on. It was no lights and siren, but finally our concern was, and Craig Grogan's call was, because he's a case agent, was we need to make the arrest on Scott even before the DNA results come back. And the arrangement was the judge gave us the arrest warrant with the request to hold the execution. The concern was that erratic driving was going to injure one of us or somebody who wasn't even connected to the case. So that's when he was arrested at Torrey Pines at the entrance to the golf course. talked to him right there at the scene of the arrest. No outrage, no protests. You got the wrong guy. You guys are rookies. This is amateur hour. You guys, you don't know what you're doing. I mean, he just was pleasant as usual. And anyway, hair was dyed, of course, trying to disguise himself. And nearly $15,000 in cash, his brother's driver's license, 3 cell phones, clothing that would work for a day office. And while he was there, we towed his car over there. I did the inventory on the car. He had nearly $15,000 in cash, his brother's driver's license, 3 cell phones. We had really good jurors, I thought. Of course, obviously I'm going to think that way because of the verdict, but they seem to analyze things. There's a couple of them in particular that speak frequently, maybe not frequently, but we had really good jurors, I thought. Of course, obviously I'm going to think that way because of the verdict, but they seem to analyze things. There's a couple of them in particular that speak frequently, maybe not frequently, but when you have shows like this, they're on it, and they have a very good demeanor about how they looked at the case. Played Major League. For the inmates, it's not a pleasant place to be. It's dangerous. It is violent. It is noisy. It doesn't smell good, and it's just I don't even like being there for a day. But I can't imagine being there for 20, 30 years because it's just hideous. It has enforcement for working cops, this administration. Probably the biggest frustration is some of the things that they come up with, not rooted in any common sense whatsoever on occasion.
This is the story on which I cut my teeth as a young reporter at Fox News. Many of you may remember that. I actually heard a lot of people, massive travesty of journalism. And virtually everyone was sinful. But be honest, I don't remember anyone other than yours truly and Dan Abrams at Court TV at the time, reporting honestly on this case, reporting accurately on this case. Everyone else in the media rushed to judgment because what was alleged in this case, for those of you who were not around or too young to care, or it's just been a long time, was that on March, I don't remember the date, but in March of 2006, 3 Duke lacrosse players gang raped a woman of color, a Black woman from Durham, North Carolina. That's where Duke is located. Finnerty on the right with the yellow tie, Evans in the middle, and Reed Seligman on the left. Just so you know, they almost went to jail for 30 years. These 3 boys almost went to prison for decades to judgment against these boys. But at the time, believe it or not, we weren't like that yet in the media. We weren't used to the media doing this. It was still a time in which we tended to be more judicious in our coverage and careful. And this was the before and after moment at which we abandoned that. It really was. This was the seminal moment in the media leaning into what we now know as wokeness when they looked at cases and stories like this one. It was a travesty in many ways. And thank God these 3 boys wound up getting let off the hook by the Attorney General who stepped in to take over. But the media, they got away with it. And they continued to sin in exactly the same way they did in that case. The media, they got away with it. And they continued to sin in exactly the same way they did in that case ever since. Here we are almost 20 years later, and they're still at it. Story and had great sources. And I'll tell you one other reason why Britt had it right, my boss, and encouraged me. Because he sensed immediately this is a political story in addition to a legal one. Because what we had in the Duke case was a white district attorney who was up for re-election in an election year in, as I pointed out, a majority-minority district. So, like, think about this. Think about these poor guys knowing they did nothing. They did nothing. And they're being accused of being vile, racist rapists. Think about this. Think about these poor guys knowing they did nothing. They did nothing. And they're being accused of being vile, racist rapists by the DA, who can't smear them often enough, and a complicit media who refuses to pause to check it out. You know the old saying in journalism? Example of what happens when a rogue prosecutor misunderstands his role in the system. A lesson many prosecutors out there today could stand to benefit from learning. Wish they'd pay attention.